Hello, and welcome to Diecast Graveyard. My name is Paul, and I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to restore a 1969 Hot Wheels TNT Bird. First thing you need to do is, using an automatic center punch, punch a dot in the center of the rivet. Please make sure you're careful because this is where your drill bit's going to go. Go ahead and drill out your rivet. Again, please be careful because if you mess this up, it's going to ruin the reinstall of your body. Using a drill, go ahead and drill out the rivet that's holding in the engine. Now there's not a lot of metal there, so you need to be careful. Some people will tap this to put a screw in to hold the engine back in place. There's really not a lot of meat there, so I'm probably just going to use 2-part epoxy. Once you get the holes in the post drilled, then you're going to use a tap, a 256 tap, and you're going to tap out those holes. Please use a little bit of oil in there because if you snap off that tap, it's going to ruin your whole restoration. Get all this done before you do any painting. Once you get the holes tapped out, go ahead and put in some screws and test fit them to make sure that they go in properly. That fits nice and snug. That looks really good. Now go ahead and put your body back on the car. And put your screws in to make sure that it fits up tightly and doesn't rattle around. That looks good. Now put the back one in. That's nice and snug. All right, they fit good. Let's go on to the next step. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to remove the wheels off the base. Now you got to remember that these cars are approximately 50 years old. The wheels on this side are missing a little bit of chrome on there. Wheels on the left side are pretty good, but we're going to go ahead and replace them all. Go ahead and snip them off. If you try and pull these off, you're liable to pull off the bearing that's on the end of the axle. And if you do that, you're either going to need to find a donor car to replace those axles, or you're going to have to try and find some out on the internet. Now they do exist, but they are quite expensive. So if you go ahead and snip the tires, it's a lot easier to get through this step. There. They came off really easy. Those tires were really brittle. There's some oxidation on the base of the car. What we're going to use is a mixture of CLR, which is calcium lime and rust remover, and water, a 50-50 mixture. Once you put the base in, you're not going to leave it in there for any longer than 4 minutes. If you leave it in there longer than that, it could attack the base of the car and start to turn it black. After 4 minutes, this should be your result. Looks pretty good. But we're going to use a brush and we're going to scrub it up a little bit too, just to get in the little nooks and crannies to make sure that we're getting almost all that oxidation. You're going to wind up polishing this later anyway, so if you can get most of it, you'll be good to go. Once you're done, go ahead and wash it in some hot soapy water and scrub her down again. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. We'll have a bunch more videos coming out in the near future. Alright, now that we got it all rinsed off and everything, we're going to wipe it on down. Now that it's all dried off, looks pretty good. Let's go to the next step. Here we're going to prepare the body for removal of the paint. You've got these old stripes on here that are made of vinyl. They do leave a lot of glue residue. You want to try and get these off. You can use a razor knife. I wouldn't use sandpaper or anything, but just go ahead and use a razor knife, whatever, peel it off. Nothing like trying to remove the stripes off of a 50-year-old car. Put it in your little container. Here I'm using citrus strip in a can. Spray it on down and let that stripper go to work. After it's sat a while, we're going to go ahead and take a good stiff brush, like a toothbrush or an old paintbrush like this, and this stuff should come right off, as you can see. It's pretty cool to sit there and watch the paint stripper bubble and take this paint off. Try and take off as much paint as you possibly can. Now you may have to apply a second or even a third coat of that paint stripper to get everything off. Man, there I missed a sticker with the door number on it. Doesn't matter, that paint stripper will take the paint off really quick. There, we've got it all off. I also do the best I can to make sure that the paint is off the inside of the car too, because if you decide to change colors, you want to make sure that you got a nice clean surface to paint on. Now we're going to go ahead and polish up the base. Using some polishing compound, go ahead and rub your polishing compound onto your surface. Grab your polishing tool with your felt wheel, your cloth wheel. Start polishing your metal. This is one of my favorite parts of doing a car. Polish it up and make it look as shiny as you can. You can't overdo it though. You may have to go back in with more than one application of the polish, but that's going to be your call. Try and get as much polished as you possibly can to make it look good. Hit your front end, hit your bumpers, hit your tail end, anything that's chrome. Want to get the inside of that spoiler too. There. Not too bad. That's nice. Now it's time to do the body. Now we're going to polish up the body. A little bit more of the polishing compound in the wheel. Rub it all over the body first because you're going to sling it everywhere. Let's get that Dremel and go to town. I love to see when you're polishing something like this and start to watch that shine come through as that polishing compound is working. That is so pretty. Try and do the whole car. You got to be careful because sometimes that Dremel will get away from you. You'll scratch up your body and you'll wind up having to re-zinc the car, and you don't want to do that if you don't have to. At this point, when you're polishing like this, you can definitely overdo it. So once you get to a point where you can see that it's nice and shiny and everything looks good, you need to stop, because you can work this thing to death. And if you polish it too much, like I was saying before, you'll start to get through the zinc coating and you'll expose the bare metal underneath. And the only thing that's going to fix that is to zinc plate the car. We are going to show you how to zinc plate cars in another episode of Diecast Graveyard. So once we do that, we'll post a video on it. Probably have a specific video to do that. Once all the polishing is done, you scrub it down with soap and water. Then you want to use the degreaser. Now this is a pretty important step because of all the oils you've got on your skin and everything else. Get that degreaser on there, scrub it with a plastic brush. You don't want to use a metal brush at this point. You've already polished your car, so you don't need to be scratching it up anymore. But use that plastic brush with that degreaser and scrub it on down and clean it up. Once this is done, then you're going to take some water and rinse it all down and then wipe it down nice and dry. Now you're ready to paint. I've got my paint already mixed up here. We're going to be using Spectre Flame Blue from the Red Line shop. Beautiful, beautiful color, one of my favorite colors. Got my little airbrush booth here, and we're ready to go. When you start to paint, make sure that the very first coats of the paint are very thin. You want to apply thin coats here at this point. You want to give something for the rest of the paint, a nice tooth to bite on, but you can't do it if it's soaking wet. I paint the insides first, and then I lightly paint the outsides, making sure that I go the full length of the car when I paint, when I can. This makes nice even strokes. You don't want to go back and forth like that if you can help it. Some people make it work. I prefer to do it this way. Very, very light. But I'll tell you, after using this product, I'm sold. It works great. Now, Bright Vision, also a supplier of these Spectre Flame paints, makes a pretty decent product too. And I'm going to be using that in the future just to give them all a chance. I'll do some reviews on these things and tell you what I think. Well, now that the first light coat is dry, we're going to go ahead and put some heavier coats on. Again, I spray some on the inside because sometimes once you get the interior in there, you may see the inside of the body. So in order to compensate for that, I paint the inside of the body the same color as the car, of course. And I think it makes it look pretty cool. So spray evenly, rotate often, don't spray in the same spot for a long period of time because it'll get super wet, and that's what makes runs, and that's what will ruin your paint job. And if you get runs, you're going to have to strip the entire thing and do it all over again. As I was learning how to paint, not just cars and stuff, but airbrushing t-shirts and things like that, I learned a lot over the years about runs and paint mixtures and techniques with the gun and everything. It takes a long time to master an airbrush, but you can do it. You can definitely do it. It just takes practice. And if you make a mistake, so be it. Clean it up, fix it, and do it again. The more of the Spectre Flame paint that you paint on these cars, the darker the color gets. So once you get to the point where your color is exactly how you want it, you need to stop, because if you keep spraying and touching up and putting more coats on there, the car is just going to get darker and darker and darker. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. You like those dark paints. I wanted blue. I didn't want dark blue. But the more I paint with this paint, the more I like it. It's nice and shiny. It's see-through. You can almost reach through the paint and touch the bare metal on the other side. It's pretty darn awesome. Do your best to make sure that you're in a dust-free environment also. That's why I've got this little spray booth. And you can fold it up and put it away until you need it again. Keep moving, keep rotating. And maybe just a little bit more here. Man, that blue is beautiful. We're just about done. Once you're done painting, this is going to have to sit anywhere between 24 and 48 hours. Now there are a couple little flecks on top of the roof. We may have to take a little light sandpaper and scuff that up just to get rid of those little bumps on top. Now the bumps on the trunk, that's in the casting. And unless you sand it down and re-zinc it, they're going to be there. Now it's time to put some new wheels on the base. You got the big shoes going in the back and the medium-sized ones in the front. When you put these on, don't horse them down because you can snap the axle or snap the bearing. I use this little tool I got from the Redline shop. You can also get them at Bright Vision. Put it back there to support the pin. Push your wheel on. And there it is. Nice. Now we'll put the ones on the front. Don't squeeze too hard yet. Put that tool on there behind the bearing. Support it. Press it with your thumb or your finger. That'll keep you from snapping the axle or the bearing. Rolls nice. It's time to do a little bit of detail on the base. We're going to take a permanent Sharpie marker in red and we're going to do the tail light in the back. Now what's really cool about this is you can put a light coat on there, but if you want the lights or what you're touching up with the marker to be darker, you just keep putting more coats on there. Just be careful. If you do make a mess, alcohol will take it off. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to detail the grille in the front. I got these little detail brushes from Hobby Lobby. A bunch of them come in a pack, pretty reasonable price. Then I'm going to use some semi-gloss black paint from Testors, using that little detail brush, and we're going to detail that grille. Just take your time and it'll turn out great. Now some people have used toothpicks, anything you can get in there. Little tiny brush with 2 or 3 hairs sticking out of it, that'll work too. You've just got to take your time if you want it to look good. If you happen to get any off on the sides, you can just take a paper towel or a piece of tissue. You can use your finger. Just clean it up. You may have to wipe it out and start again. That's part of the fun of this hobby. Yep, a little bit there. Just wipe it away. That's looking pretty darn good. Now it's time to paint the vinyl top on the car. I've gone ahead and taped it all off, and we're using this black vinyl paint from the Red Line shop, and I'll tell you, I am really liking where this is going. That black vinyl looks so real. Now when you're initially spraying anything masked off, you want to spray straight on, because if you spray or paint down towards the tape, it's liable to leach under the tape. As you paint, make sure that you paint very, very lightly for those first coats. That'll help seal that edge a little bit, and you won't get any bleed under. Now with this, a little bit goes a long way, so you don't have to mix up a lot, and you don't have to spray a lot on there, because this paint actually looks textured. But man, I tell you, it looks really, really good. So if you got a vinyl top that you want to replace on a Hot Wheels, this stuff from the Red Line shop is phenomenal. Now it's time to take the tape off. Don't want to let it sit for hours and hours either. Once you get it painted, take that tape off there. You can have so much fun with this hobby. It only takes you to start doing it. Now, in other videos that I'll have coming up, I'm going to have a video on how to select a compressor to use this, how to select an airbrush. We're going to test a bunch of the different paints. We got the Red Line Shop Spectraflame paint, and they've got some really cool enamel paints that I'm excited to try. I want to try all the Bright Vision products. They sound really good, and I'm looking forward to using those too. I want to try some Testors paints, just because. Now, some people use a rattle can. I'm not a big fan of that because I think too much paint comes out of it. But that's just my opinion. Some people make it look pretty darn good. The other thing I've heard people using is nail polish. If you got to get that real sparkly finish or anything like that, some people swear by it. But I'm a very big fan of Createx paints, especially the Auto Air paints and the Wicked Air paints. Now those are water-based paints, so those are pretty darn cool. Now when I use the pinstriping here to mask it off, I use this FBS pinstriping tape. This tape is phenomenal. I've used the Tamiya tape, which I'll show you here. There we go. It works good too for masking, but it doesn't bend very well because it's made out of paper. This FBS tape is plastic, but the downfall to the FBS tape is that it is expensive. It's for professionals. If you really want to get that nice clean look, this is the product that you use. I'm not being paid by these folks, but I love the product and I'll endorse it 100%. I'll have a link to where you can get this. It's a fantastic product. We're back. Now for one of the final steps here, we're going to pinstripe this car and we're going to go ahead and put some numbers on the thing. Now here I've got an older TNT Bird, as you see here. I went ahead and measured the stripes on this, and they're 1/4 of an inch. A lot of the kits out there that I've seen on eBay and places like that, the kits are incredibly expensive. But if you go to a sign shop and get some scrap vinyl, you can cut out your own stripes by hand. All you gotta do is measure 1/4 of an inch and cut some stripes. Now, fortunately, my wife just happens to own a sign shop, and I went ahead and had some numbers made. Now this was just the first run. They're a little bit smaller than the ones that originally go on there, but you know what? These are free. So this is why I'm going to use those. This car was number 5. That's what we're going to use again, the number 5s. And we're going to put some stripes on the car and make it look really cool. So let's do it. Here we go. Now your hand should be fairly clean here, but I find it hard to maneuver with those rubber gloves on when I'm doing this. So when you put the stripes on, just center it as best you can. That's all you have to do. The car on the trunk just happens to have a indentation where the stripe fits really, really nice. There we go. And then once you get to a position where you can cut the tension off of it, go ahead and cut your tension off. We're going to trim this up in just a moment. Same thing here in the front. Make sure that it's nice and straight. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to trim the excess off. Sometimes making a smaller cut ahead of time helps, but this one's pretty tedious. Now what I recommend here on the roof is just tuck it under and fold it away. Same thing on the trunk here. Tuck it under and then fold it away. All right, that's going to be nice. Let's shorten up the back stripe. And then tuck it under. That way there you get plenty to remove it if you have to. Then rub it down. Make sure it's adhering fine. Now we got to get that little booger by the engine. There we go. And tuck it under. Nice. All we got left is this one by the engine here. Now it's time for the numbers. Like I said, these are a little bit smaller than the originals. What I do is I peel it off and put it on the end of my knife. Put it where I want to put it. That looks pretty damn cool. Let's do the other side. There we go. Let's put it together We got our interior, which is in good shape. We got our windshield, which is in really good shape. No buffing needed there. And we got the base all done, ready to go. Let's put it together and let's have our reveal. This is what we started with. It's a little bit rough, but what do they say? A diamond in the rough. We took it apart, we cleaned it, we painted it, and we put it back together. So here's the final results. And here's the final reveal. I want to thank you for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed the content that we've put out. I love doing this. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of projects coming up. We've got some customizations coming up, wheel swaps, how-tos, tips and tricks, all kinds of things we've got planned. How to select an air compressor, how to select an airbrush, the different types of paints people use, custom cars, radical cars, old red lines, Matchbox. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about Matchbox. We've got a whole bunch of Matchbox restorations coming up, and it's gonna be great fun. And we got some special announcements on the Matchbox side of the house that we're gonna put out here at a later time. So thank you for joining us, and come on back and see us again at Diecast Graveyard. My name is Paul. Have a great day. I'd like to give special thanks to Daniel Bettel, who has helped me along using Filmora as my video editor. I'd like to thank Zach at Bare Metal Hot Wheels, one of my big inspirations. And I'd also like to thank Austin at Diecast Resurrection, the funny Canadian. I love his work. I love that guy. And overseas, over in Australia, Marty at Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. You guys have been very inspirational for me to get my own page started, and I look forward to seeing your work in the future, and hopefully you'll continue to look for mine. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.